But if you really want to do it, nothing's going to stop you. So get in and get focused. Treat your time like you're at the office. You know, get a set time. You walk into the studio every day and you paint until this time. Take your time and climb the ladder. Start with whatever gallery you can get in. Have an eye on the gallery you want up here 10 years out or whatever, and slowly start to plan and move for that.
Welcome to the BoldBrush Show, where we believe that fortune favors a bold brush. My name is Laura Orangel-Bayer, and I'm your host. For those of you who are new to the podcast, we are a podcast that covers art marketing techniques and all sorts of business tips specifically to help artists learn to better sell their work. We interview artists at all stages of their careers, as well as others who are in careers tied to the art world in order to hear their advice and insights. For today's episode, we sat down with Matt Smith, an accomplished plein air painter with a deep love for the outdoors, especially in his home state of Arizona. Matt discusses his artistic journey from early exposure to art through his family to finding his passion in landscape painting. He shares the challenges of becoming a full-time artist, emphasizing the importance of community, discipline, and embracing failure. Matt describes his painting process, starting with outdoor inspiration and refining in the studio. He also describes the role of galleries and social media in his career. He offers advice to aspiring artists, highlighting the value of maintaining a work structure, climbing up the ladder slow and steady, and maintaining a healthy work-life balance. Finally, Matt shares details about his upcoming shows and online teaching opportunities. Welcome, Matt, to the BoldBrush Show. How are you today?
Doing great. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thank you for being here. I'm really excited to talk to you because we were just discussing this before we started. But you have a very well-rounded experience with the history of art, especially having an art historian mother, which is really cool. And your plein air work is so gorgeous. I love the vibratory quality that it has, and I can tell that your voice is just so present in your work in a beautiful way that I can tell that it's your work, which is kind of hard to see sometimes in plein air, because plein air especially wet into wet plein air is so hard to distinguish sometimes. But I find that your work is very distinguished, and I love that about it.
It's good to hear. Thank you.
You're welcome. Yeah. But before we dive into your gorgeous work, do you mind telling us a bit about who you are and what you do?
Well, I grew up in Scottsdale, Arizona, kind of an outdoorsy kid in a family that liked to get out and hike and paint. As you mentioned earlier, my mother was an art history major, so art was always in our lives to one degree or another, and that's how it started, the connection between the two. It still took me quite a long time to figure out that I wanted to go in the direction of landscape. When I initially started painting, I was more interested in wildlife and figurative work, but it never really struck like landscape did when I finally started doing that. It was funny because I'd be painting away and always looking out the window, wondering what's going on outside. And on the weekends, I'd be out camping or fishing or just exploring. But for some reason, I thought, if you're going to do this, you have to go in the direction of figurative work and portraiture and that kind of thing. So that's what I did until I slowly started looking around. Like I say, I grew up in Scottsdale, so I had exposure to all these great galleries. And when I'd walk through the galleries, it was the landscape work that really caught my attention, generally speaking. And so it started pulling me more and more in that direction. And when I started to finally meet the artists who were painting along those lines, like Jim Reynolds and Clyde Aspavig and artists like that, they really kind of encouraged me and opened my eyes to the possibilities. And I like just adventure and travel too, so everything kind of went hand
in hand. Yeah, and of course the landscapes in Arizona are so striking that, of course, I would also be looking around like, wow, I want to capture that, which I definitely see in your work as well. But it also sounds like, having your home life so surrounded by art, did you follow the path of the artist from an early age, or was it something you returned to later?
I kind of like to think of it as I think every young person loves to draw and experiment and see things come alive on a sheet of paper, and knowing that they were in control of that. I'm just one of those folks who didn't let anybody take that from me. So it never stopped. All through school, I was always drawing, doodling, even painting. Started painting when I was, I think I got my first paint set when I was around 12 years old as a gift from my parents, and started playing around with that. And then that went into watercolors, and I played with watercolor for a while before oils took over. But it was always there. I was always playing with it. My mother was, she actually started school as an art major and didn't have the confidence to stick with it. She thought everybody was better than she was, so she went over to art history. But at home, she'd dabble a little bit. She'd sketch, and from time to time, she'd paint. So that influence and inspiration was there as well. And then, like I said earlier, my parents collected work on a small scale. So I'd get to meet artists. They became friends with a number of artists, and see the work hanging in the house, and just having it around was always there. It was always in the air, like I say.
Yeah, that is so cool. So I'm guessing, once you graduated from high school, did you dive immediately into being an art major, or did you kind of look around a bit before you settled in on that?
But by the time I hit high school, I was already in a gallery and selling my work. So I was serious about it. But at the same time, I thought, you've got to be realistic. So I actually entered college as a business marketing major. I thought, well, business is smart. It's everywhere. I'm going to do the marketing side because it's a little more creative as far as business goes. And during one of my electives, beginning drawing class, my teacher pulled me aside eventually and said, I really like what you're doing. You really need to come over to the art department. So I gave that some thought for a while. And so on my second year of college, I entered as a painting major into the art college.
Do you find that having even just done 1 year of business marketing, did you find that any of that information was useful for you in the business side of being an artist?
Uh, yes and no. The beginning business was just so basic. What was more important to me was being surrounded by a family of businessmen. My father, my brother, my brothers-in-law were all businessmen, so I would listen to them talk at family gatherings and had exposure to that. And I always was able to consult my father, who was a good businessman, and it, in a word, yes. But at the same time, I was so focused on the art that's the direction I wanted to go. It's smart for every artist to take some business classes, because whether you know it or not, if you're going to do it professionally, you are going to be a business person. And so you should know basic concepts and ideas about business and how to run a business.
Definitely. I completely agree. And I'm so glad that you say that because, I feel like a lot of people, when they dive into this career, they're so in love with painting, and that's totally great. But then just the love of painting isn't going to pay the bills for the most part. You have to be, you know, very aware of that whole aspect, unless you can hire someone to take care of that for you. But I doubt that someone who is an artist can afford that, at least at the beginning. Um, and actually, that's another aspect that I want to ask you, which is when you finished college and you had your degree and everything, what challenges did you face when you became a full-time artist? Did you have maybe a side job or any type of side income at first and then weaned off, or were you able to just jump in?
Well, I jumped in, but I did have to do side jobs. There was no money. I got married about 6 months after I graduated, something like that. And so my wife worked, and she was very supportive, so that helped. As a
Mhm.
matter of fact, pretty much everybody's going to need something along those lines, unless they're very, very good from the start. But it's a struggle. But if you really love the process of creating and painting, you're having so much fun with that you don't realize how difficult times are. So I was surrounded by friends who were graduating college and getting jobs, business majors, that kind of thing, and doing quite well. And so for quite a long time, I was sort of the broke guy. Um, but I befriended a number of artists early on: Ralph Oberg, Dan Young, Lorenzo Chavez, Ray Roberts, people like that. And we would go out and paint together, and we we were like minded, and And in some cases, some of us were doing well, others were kind of broke, so we could kind of feed off of one another, and that really helped.
Mhm.
But there were some lean years, which builds character. I think every artist should have to deal with that at some point.
Yes, I agree. On 2 points actually that you mentioned, which is the first one being, the importance of community. Having people around you that are supportive, and then also other artists who are maybe going through the exact same thing, who can, either commiserate or can, you can help each other kind of understand the situation a little bit more and maybe try to problem solve if there's some sort of hiccup on the road that maybe they've seen and you're just witnessing or experiencing, which I think is really important. And the
Very
second point, yeah. And the second point is also, I totally agree that it is important to go through those lean times for the psyche, I guess, because it's very easy to get complacent. If you're, always doing well, it can get very easy to take it for granted. And then when those times hit where, oh no, I should have maybe saved more money, or I should have, been a little bit more careful, it can really destroy your self-esteem. So I think being prepared for that is very, very key. Yeah.
It is, and I've seen that a lot with young artists who came right out of school and they were just rocking it, doing great, and they've been like this ever since.
Mhm.
When I came out of school, I was so bad there was nowhere to go but up. So it's been a constant, exciting, slow journey, but 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 like I say, it's challenging, it's rewarding to see constant growth, even if it's little incremental bits. So I saw both sides of that because I have so many friends who are artists, and I'd much rather see a constant, level of growth and just hit it right out of the chute and level off, because you'll get bored, and that'll begin to show on your work if you're not careful.
I completely agree. And it can also risk, the artist, I guess, becoming on one hand a bit of a one-trick pony where they know what sells, and that's great. There's nothing wrong with that. But like you said, it can get a little bit boring, because then you have that issue of the gallery demands a certain type of painting from you, but you're being stifled because you want to try other things and you've already caged yourself. And then from there, getting out of that can be a bit risky. So I completely agree with you. I would prefer a slow and steady sort of rise than something stratospheric and then getting stuck, like a little satellite. Yeah. And then the other thing actually, that I find interesting is, you mentioned earlier that you had started with figurative work and then eventually, went over to the side of landscape. Um, how how was that like for you to shift over, to pivot, like, you know what, this isn't for me, even though I enjoyed it, I want to try this. What was that like for you? And did you find that if you had any galleries at the time, did they support that as well?
Um, the transition for me was more gradual. So I was doing portraits and, sort of Native American things, and just as a side note, the best classes I had in college were figure drawing, because you had to get in there and you had to measure and you had to do it, and there was no departure from the reality of what was in front of you, like there wasn't a lot of the other painting classes. So that was great. But I started looking at art around me, like I said earlier, in the galleries here in Scottsdale, and I started seeing some of the Western artwork and the wildlife work. And so I started playing around with that idea, which were figures in a larger landscape. And I like that idea. So I started pursuing that and quickly realized, well, I don't know anything about cowboys and I'm not a wildlife guy. I appreciate wildlife. It's always exciting to see wildlife, but it didn't grab me like the rest of the landscape did. So eventually I started leaving all the figures and wildlife out and just
Okay.
pursuing the landscape. When I did that, I realized the change was going to be dramatic. So I stepped aside from the gallery that I was showing in at the time. I just said, I'm going to go in a new direction, and I need time to develop this. So I walked away from galleries for about, I'd say, 4 years or so. Well, I started developing that. And then about a year or two out of college, I started feeling, okay, I need to start selling some of these or at least trying. And then I got back into the galleries and it sort of went from there. But even after college, I graduated in 85 and I wasn't really seeing results the way I wanted in with my paintings until about 1990. So it took about 5 years and I was working full time at the easel after a college degree before I really started seeing the results that I wanted to see. And once that grabbed hold, the excitement really kicked into gear, and then I just kind of went from there.
I really love that you mentioned that because I think a lot of people, especially today with younger artists, there's this sense of urgency with, oh, I just graduated, I have to get my work out there and I have to paint, I have to do that. And I feel like that really drowns out that exploratory phase of allowing yourself to work at something and focus on something, kind of like how you said earlier, the slow and steady way. Um, and then once you see, hey, this is really working out and I'm being, cautious and disciplined about this, things start sort of taking off, or at least that's what it sounds like from your experience, which is it feels more stable than everyone today. I guess worried so much about social media, much more than the actual craft of painting itself. So I like that. I think that's awesome, and it's also more realistic. I actually would have said 10 years, but 5 years is actually pretty good to have done something pretty steadily and then seeing the results start to kick up. That's really great.
Well, I was still painting 15 years prior to that, so it's been a long haul. But the comment you just made about being in a hurry to succeed is a really valid one. That can be very dangerous. You're right about social media. It has kind of opened the floodgates and exposed us to thousands and thousands of artists all over the world in a click. A fraction of a second, you can see great artwork everywhere. So you feel the need to, like you say, to race and keep up with everybody else, and that can be very damaging. You really, as artists, we need to set boundaries around us, kind of a secret force field around us, and keep everything that's damaging out. And that's been really important to me, especially now that I'm approaching my senior years. I'm really starting to reinforce those boundaries because I know there's an end game now. When I'm young, it's nothing but time. And I just want to focus on doing the best paintings I can, and I have to create an atmosphere in which to do that. So it's very important. If you're going awry with social media and the influences there, you really need to pull back. And as you know, there's a lot of garbage on social media, but if you're disciplined enough to kind of filter through that, there's a lot of really great stuff. All these young artists all over the world who are just doing phenomenal work, and it's so inspiring to see. And it really kind of helps us as individuals to quit thinking we're so important. As soon as you do, crack an art history book, go to a museum, go to a good gallery, and you're put right in your place. Go to the ultimate source, which is nature, and that will calm you right down and focus your attention.
Yes. Oh my gosh, yes. It's very humbling to remember, first of all, like you said, just cracking open a book of, any artist from the past who is, who has experienced nature itself, right? I mean, I feel like today, obviously with the camera, we've been a little bit spoiled in that sense, where it's a little bit more easy for us. We have tools they provide more of a way of working that is, I guess, a little bit away from nature because it's so technologically based. But seeing things, say, like from Corot, right, where he's capturing the landscape and he's doing it in a way that it's melancholic, it has his essence in it. And then seeing the landscape itself and how difficult it is to capture it, I completely agree. It's a very humbling experience, especially when you fail at it, right? I think that's another thing that is really important is allowing yourself to failure. And to tie back to, the social media part, it can be way too much pressure to perform all the time with social media, especially if you're posting every day or you have to post every day. It is so important to fail, and give yourself that space to fail and not be worried about, oh, but if I don't paint this well enough, I can't post it, and then no one's gonna follow me and I'm gonna lose followers or whatever people worry about these days in that way. So I think, hearing your perspective about giving yourself time and being pragmatic and being constantly humbled by the things around you that you're painting, is such an important dose of reality that I think we need to inject back into the art world, especially, people who are trapped in the social media loop. And actually, it makes me want to know a little bit more about your process, from the conceptual creative side all the way into finished piece. How does that work for you?
It always starts outdoors. So I don't try to come up with preconceived ideas and then go out and search for them unless they come to me and they're powerful, because you end up spending all your time searching for something that might not exist. For me, it's better to go out. I spend a lot of time painting outdoors. And I'm real excited right now because we're coming off a very long, hot summer and the weather is beautiful. So I'm looking at months of outdoor painting time here in the desert around my house. So that's always exciting. But I get out there and I spend a lot of time out there, and I try to keep an open mind when I go outdoors, and let different scenarios present themselves to me, or subjects, or whatever it might be. But if I decide I want to go out and paint, a barrel cactus silhouetted against a dark boulder, I might hike around for 4 hours, 5, 10 hours looking for that exact barrel cactus before I go home with nothing. Whereas if I just go out and keep an open mind and something shows up that's exciting, then I can paint it. Now I bring that field painting back into the studio and I'll decide, and I back that up with photographs like you were just talking about.
Mm-hmm.
I'll decide if it's worthy of painting on a larger scale or developing farther. And when you do enough of those, they start stacking up. I don't know if you can see behind me, but I have rails all over around my studio with these things stacked on there, and stacks everywhere, kind of just like photographs. So it starts there. It starts with inspiration and idea that's presented itself out in the field. And then I come in and I develop it here in the studio on a larger scale. I will say this, though. I put a lot of finish into my work on location. And that all started from the early years when I couldn't afford to travel. So everything was a desert around here. And I rarely brought a camera with me because I could always go back the next day. So I learned to finish these in case I didn't use them as field work. I could send them to the galleries and at least try to make a little bit of money to cover art supplies and that kind of thing. And it kind of went from there. And an idea might sit around and germinate for 4 or 5 years. You just never know before I really think, okay, there it is. I knew there was something there, and then have at it.
So when you're hiking around, and you're seeing the landscape around you, is there sometimes a moment where you look at something and you're just like, aha, like, is that how it works for you? You just have this vision and it aligns with a spot and you say, that right there. Is that how it is for you?
That's how it is. You never know what it'll be. It'll be a dramatic light condition. It'll be an unusual arrangement of elements, the character of an old dead mesquite tree, the classic iconic saguaro silhouetted against the sky. You never know. But again, like I mentioned, if you keep an open mind, you're likely to see a larger variety in your work. You hit on it a minute ago about when you come out of the chute rock solid and level out, and you repeat yourself. It's because you know there's success in that from a financial standpoint, and that can be deadly. But going out in the desert, I paint a lot of desert washes, and I'll probably get criticized for that. But that goes to the very root of my childhood. Growing up here in the desert, they were the natural corridors of the desert. These desert washes. And so I'd spend hours, I hiked miles and miles up and down these desert washes, just fascinated by the character of the plant life and the rock formations along there, because that's where the water was. So that's where the variety was. And it's just beautiful. And to this day, I look at a nice desert wash and I just think, get the paint gear out. I want to have at it.
That's awesome though, because that's where the difference lies. You have a passion for them, and that's what you love, versus someone doing it because they know there's financial gain. I feel like that's the big change in those two perspectives. And it goes to show that, your love of the subject itself wins out. And like I said earlier too, if someone does, paint the same thing over and over, that's fine, especially if it does make them money. There's nothing wrong with that. I just know that at one point, that person might be doing it more for the financial side than for their passion. And that can really make or break one's relationship with this career, because this career is so self-guided that once you start, bowing your head to the financial side, it can start weighing heavy. And that's a bad road to go on. So I think, yeah, you have a very big difference there with enjoying what you paint, and just making sure that it gets done because you love it, you know?
Yeah, and I'm not going to buck the financial side of things too. It's always nice to get that red dot.
Of course.
But and you can still repeat yourself painting what you love, exploring an idea over a period of decades even. But generally, if it's grounded in a real appreciation for what it is, maybe a history of you and your youth, then there's something there. I teach workshops from time to time, and I've had students from places like, I don't know, Illinois, Missouri, places that aren't as dramatic as the West. But boy, I've been to those places and they are beautiful. And I'm telling these folks, you have a history there. You have something to say about this. Tell me, show me the beauty. If I, as an outsider, I see it, then you probably key into it and connect to it on a much deeper level than I do. And so that sort of gives them the freedom to love where they are and celebrate their surroundings. Have you ever been to Arkansas? My God, I never thought Arkansas would be so beautiful, but what an incredible place. Yeah, so it's everywhere, and living here in the United States, we have access to these areas, especially out west, where we have a lot of BLM, Bureau of Land Management, land and national forest. I was told very early on, don't paint the Sonoran Desert because you can't sell it, and I saw that as a challenge. And the more I painted it, the more I realized what an absolutely stunningly beautiful ecosystem it is. And the geography and geology and all of it, it's just beautiful. And I was lucky because I didn't have many artists to refer to, historical artists, to kind of be inspired or influenced by. There was Maynard Dixon and, Jimmy Swinnerton and a few others like that, but there wasn't a lot. So I had to find my own way, which I was frustrated about that early on, but I'm very thankful now that I had to do that.
Yeah. And you just mentioned about feeling challenged to do it, just to prove people wrong, and doing it like that. That really refers back a little bit to what I mentioned about being such a self-guided career, where you truly can do whatever as an artist. You can paint whatever you want, which can be, I guess, a little bit overwhelming for some people. And it also makes me curious about, why you started with figurative. Because you must have enjoyed figurative as well, right? And then, realized later on, oh, maybe that's not what works. And the reason I'm curious about that is because I find that some artists, or a lot of artists, start out with one sort of view about what they think they want, and then maybe that changes over time. Do you find that that was the case for you, where you did really enjoy figurative, but then it kind of didn't fit in anymore?
Yeah, that's exactly what happened. I was inspired by artists whose work I saw and had access to in the galleries around here, and some of the artists my parents were collecting, and so that's what I was exposed to. But as I broadened my horizons and the art I had access to, Phoenix Art Museum, the Cowboy Artists of America show, things like that, I began to look elsewhere, and then access to the magazines and discovering historical painters that I wasn't aware of, Edgar Payne, and I mentioned Maynard Dixon earlier, Carl Rungus. I began to see and appreciate their work in a more painterly approach to painting, and how difficult that was to do, and how beautiful it was. And so I started moving in that direction. But that's a personal thing. There's nothing wrong with figurative painters. I have friends who are figurative painters whose work I collect. I think they're absolutely phenomenal. Look up Bob Limler for one of them if you're not familiar with his work. And yeah, so you see how good they are and how much they really love it. And I've gone out painting with people like Bob, and he enjoys a day in the field, but it's the next day I'm ready to go back, and maybe he isn't. And then the next day and the next day. So we're all different. And that's what I mean by, kind of discovering who you are and identifying who you are, and celebrate those aspects of what excite you and how they apply to your work.
Yeah. At BoldBrush, we inspire artists to inspire the world, because creating art creates magic, and the world is currently in desperate need of magic. BoldBrush provides artists with free art marketing, creativity, and business ideas and information. This show is an example. We also offer written resources, articles, and a free monthly art contest open to all visual artists. We believe that fortune favors the bold brush. And if you believe that too, sign up completely free at boldbrushshow.com. That's BoldBrush show.com. The BoldBrush Show is sponsored by FASO. Now more than ever, it's crucial to have a website when you're an artist, especially if you want to be a professional in your career. Thankfully, with our special link, faso.com/podcast, you can make that come true and also get over 50% off your first year on your artist website. Yes, that's basically the price of 12 lattes in 1 year, which I think is a really great deal, considering that you get sleek and beautiful website templates that are also mobile friendly, e-commerce, print on demand in certain countries, as well as access to our marketing center that has our brand new art marketing calendar. And the art marketing calendar is something that you won't get with our competitor. The art marketing calendar gives you day-by-day, step-by-step guides on what you should be doing today, right now, in order to get your artwork out there and seen by the right eyes so that you can make more sales this year. So if you want to change your life and actually meet your sales goal this year, then start now by going to our special link, faso.com/podcast. That's FASO.com/podcast. Yeah, no, I love that. And I mean, from earlier that I mentioned, I also love figurative work very much, and portraiture. I just find it fascinating too, because being an artist is such a transformative thing. You might be painting one thing for one while, and then the next time you might be doing something else. And along an artist's career, especially if it's, if they've been working for very long, it's inevitable that their work is going to change and have these fluctuations and these discoveries within them, which is why I just find it interesting to hear someone start out with one thing and then switch over to another thing, and then maybe in a couple of years you might be doing something else, because I think also, referring to younger artists today, I find that a lot of them, they try to niche down so much that they kind of trap themselves into one thing, and then they don't know how to get out of it, or they want to niche themselves into something, but they're afraid that they won't get out of it, if you know what I mean. Like it can be very stifling as well to try to corner yourself into one tiny, like, oh, well, this is what I am going to be known for. I'm going to be known for this exact thing forever. And it doesn't have to be like that.
It doesn't. And when you come out as a young artist and you have nothing but time, it's think about it. 40 years later, are you still going to be excited about it? And that's really important because that is a long time. And you've got to maintain some level of interest. I still get really excited when I go outside to paint. I've done a couple of terrific trips lately, painting fall color in Colorado, the West Coast, that kind of thing. And I just, every time I get out and start hiking or set up, it's just, wow, I can't believe I have access to this and how beautiful. Why isn't everybody out here painting today? Why am I the only one out here? So figure a way to maintain that excitement. And if you do burrow down to just one thing and that keeps your excitement, great. Everybody's different. And when people start telling you have to do this, you have to do that, a red flag should go up. But as long as you stay excited and interested about it, then you're probably going to see some success.
Absolutely.
And by the way, you had mentioned failure before. Failure is a part of the process. So you either learn to embrace it and learn from it, or it's going to lead to just years of frustration. Everybody deals with it. I don't care if you're in music, if you're in acting, if you're in business, sports. Failure is part of the process, and so just let it roll off your back and go and plow on. Just keep going.
Yes, and that's such a great point too. Because it reminds us that our measure of worth isn't the painting, right? It comes from that learning and moving forward, like you said, letting it roll off your back, just keep going, because that's just a moment in time, right? It's oops, well, that's a mistake and that's okay, I just won't do it again. And I think a lot of artists, we're so sensitive that we see a failed painting and it breaks us, we get depressed. I feel like it happens to all of us.
Any artist's most important painting is the next one. So as soon as you finish, you're off to the next idea and trying to develop that and pursue that. And that's what keeps it exciting. And like you say, fun. Enjoy the process. If you don't, you're in trouble. It can still be frustrating and difficult, but you can find enjoyment in it as well.
Yeah.
Especially if you're standing outside.
Yeah, I feel like if I ever want to try plein air in the desert, I would call you because I would hope your excitement is so contagious. And I'd be like, yeah, I think I see it too.
Yeah, I'll show you the good stuff. Come on out.
Yeah.
A lot of people come into the Phoenix metro area, and so many people who have come here have bladed the desert or cleared it and planted plant life from wherever they came from, California, Minnesota, or wherever. Big deciduous trees that wouldn't last a week here without a sprinkler system. But if you go out beyond those areas into the real desert, it is beautiful. It is really something.
Yeah. And I love that you mentioned, this is a bit off topic here, but I love that you mentioned the, I guess the natural occurring plants of the area versus the ones that are brought in. I mean, there's a reason the native plants of a certain, type of zone work. It's because they should be there. And seeing other trees that aren't supposed to be there put so much pressure on the environment. That's another aspect that's a little bit heartbreaking, but only people who care enough to even notice, like you, will say something about it, right? So I just found that very interesting, that it made you a bit more aware of the environment, whereas anyone else would probably be like, oh yeah, that's just a tree, but you're also thinking like, that's not supposed to be here.
Yeah, and they can be beautiful, but yeah, it's yeah,
it's like, well, I don't know, I love that your observation has gone beyond just, oh, I like this, into, oh, I want to celebrate the natural beauty of this specific place so much that I want to bring to light all of its components, which I really love. I love that aspect of what you're bringing up.
Yeah, I'm seeing these AI photographs, artificial intelligence photographs popping up on social media of, say, Monument Valley with saguaros. And that doesn't happen. They don't grow up there. No. And everybody comments how beautiful it is. And, oh my God, I love the saguaros. And you think, God, All
What's
sorts of
wrong?
strange things are going on out there.
Yes, very topsy-turvy. Um, and by the way, I did also want to know how, since you've been, working with galleries for a long time, how have you personally continued to work with galleries and, maintained a relationship with them? What do you recommend for someone who maybe wants to work with a gallery?
Um, I love my relationships with my galleries. I have been very fortunate. So I haven't had to do a lot of direct sales work, which I don't have a problem with that, other than it takes time away from painting. So the galleries have done their job, which has allowed me to do my thing, build a good relationship with the galleries you're in, understand that it's how difficult it is to successfully run a gallery. I just had I just attended a show in one of my galleries up in Cody, Wyoming, the Simpson Gallagher Gallery, that just celebrated their 30th anniversary. I was really happy for them. They've done a phenomenal job of making that work. And then Maxwell Alexander just had their 12th anniversary, and they're just doing great. I like seeing these young upstarts, and then there are galleries like the Legacy Gallery that I show in Scottsdale that's been around for, gosh, I'm thinking they go back at least to the early 90s. So they've been around for 30 plus years, 35 years or whatever. And so these galleries, especially if you've known these people the whole time, you develop relationships with them, and they can take care of that business end of things. But be mindful that it's generally they're in high traffic areas, so its rent is very expensive. If they're doing their job, which most of them do, they're worth the commission. Yeah, and just I would much rather show in galleries than do direct sales all day long. Even though I will say that social media in so many different art forms has eliminated the middleman, and now you can very easily and very quickly go directly to the clients if you choose to do that, which is great because you get the full retail sales amount. But again, at what cost? It's worth it for me to pay the gallery their commission and spend that time outdoors, where somebody else might say, no, I want to develop these relationships. And so again, another case of it's just a personal preference thing.
And like you said, there are pros and cons to each direction. Social media is really great in that, and actually have found a lot of people who do have galleries and social media, oftentimes they can just direct the person that's interested in their work to their gallery, instead of committing the cardinal sin of selling under the gallery, which no one should do. But there is that benefit of, if you do want more control over your sales, then there's that option of just going direct. It seems like both ways of doing it have their merits, and I agree with you. There's always a price, and if for someone who does have a gallery, you're saving time that would be taken away from painting. And the side that's more, I guess, more heavy on the mind of like, oh well, I have to ship this painting and I have to pack it, and then that's going to cost money as well, which is something people can consider if they do decide to cut the middleman, as you said. But have you also found that there are other marketing tools that have helped you, whether it's, going to a show and talking directly to collectors, or going to maybe painting societies? Has any of that, helped with your sales?
All of the above. And just to be clear, I do direct sales too, and I don't see that as undercutting the gallery. What would be undercutting the gallery is if the painting was in the gallery and you sold that out from under them. That I don't do. I might pull a painting that's been in a gallery a while and send it to another dealer, which I've done before, but that's a different deal. But if I post an image on Facebook and somebody contacts me, is that available? And it just came out of the field yesterday, then it's fair game. Again, middle or social media, like I say, with eliminating the middleman, has also exposed all collectors to all galleries, all artists, and everything. So it used to be a collector would go to one or two specific galleries, and it was kind of like their client, so you'd respect that. Now you don't know who saw your work where, or what's going on with that. So it's really blurred the lines and created some degree of confusion. Just pay respect to your galleries if you're working with them, and understand that, and they'll understand as well that that you're going to be selling too, and so do the other galleries. I had a gallery tell me something. One of my gallery owners told me something very interesting about 10 years ago. He said, Matt, we don't so much fight for the clients anymore. We fight for the artists, because the clients are going to go wherever they have to go to get the artists they want. And that was the first time I ever heard that. And I thought that was very interesting. So there's that aspect of it too. But in regards to marketing, I think everything comes into play. We talked about organizations earlier. A lot of the shows that I participate in, like the Prix de West, and I'm about to do the Coors show here and the Briscoe, and some of the gallery shows I just did, they really like the artists to be in attendance, because the collectors like to meet the artists. So you can make contacts there that can be very lasting. Again, back to the galleries, social media. If you want to advertise, that's great. It's very expensive. Anytime I did advertise, what was more important to me was advertising the brand rather than a specific painting. I have a lot of friends who are very picky about the specific painting because it has to be available, even if it's not one of their better works. And I've talked to them quietly, and I said, put the best painting you have out there, even if it's sold, because that's what people are going to put with your name. And it's very important. So you have to develop that too. And I'm not a real good marketing guy, even though, like I said, that's what I started with in college, because I haven't had to be, because of the galleries. So if I was coming out, a lot of these young artists that are just coming out now are going to have to be a lot more aware of social media and how to work it and how to take the bull by the horns and do all that on their own. But the good news is there's nobody to tell them they can't anymore. Like a gallery director, sorry, you can't show here. Okay, well, I'll show on Instagram or Facebook or wherever. Because and the other beautiful thing is you can advertise worldwide that fast for $0. And if you have a large following, thousands of people are going to see your image instantly. Whereas magazines, what is a good circulation? I don't even know. 70,000 would probably be a big one. And you're paying $2,800 for a page, or $3,500 or something. Yeah, that's not easy.
That's painful.
Yeah.
Yeah, those are excellent points. I completely agree that, social media has definitely leveled the playing field in a lot of ways, really opened up the floor to anyone who's enthusiastic about painting. And even then, I've also seen a shift where galleries oftentimes will look more favorably at a possible, artist that they want to show with, if their social media following is high, which is very interesting as well, how both of those worlds are interacting in that way. And I love that you mentioned that it isn't undercutting the gallery if someone saw it first on your page and you got to sell it, because it wasn't with the gallery. Because I have heard some people have issues with their specific galleries over that, where who gets the sale if the artist already made the painting, but it wasn't with them. That's a bit of a gray area. But it's good that your gallery understands, like, hey, it is what it is.
Yeah, that's where I get sideways with galleries, if they start trying to tell you that you owe them. Like, I used to do a show in California, and there was a gallery out, a group show with a bunch of artists, and there was a gallery that represented several, and they wanted a commission of paintings sold at that show, even though the show was already taking a commission. She said, you're my artist, this is my region. And I thought, that's insane. That's where you're overstepping the lines, and that can be, a person that's difficult to work with. You can't do that. I had somebody ask about a painting that was on my website the other day that was in a gallery, and I sent them to the gallery. I wasn't going to take it back from the gallery to make a full sale. So, and I was happy my gallery got to make some money too. So everybody came out fine, and I look better in my gallery's eyes, because I sent a client to them. And as far as the following on social media, these galleries are trying to make a living too. So sure, they want artists that are going to bring people in and expose hopefully expose all those clients to the rest of the artists in their gallery, maximize sales. It's just smart business. One of the things my dad told me a long time ago is, Matt, in business, everything is negotiable. And I always remember that. So just remember that. There's no one set way. I've had galleries call me on the phone and say, Matt, we love your work. We'd love to show your work. This is our commission rate. And I said, well, that won't work for me. This is what I work on. Well, we can't do that because we're on the same rate with every artist. Well, I know for a fact they aren't. And I know if Howard Turping or Richard Schmid came into the gallery and said, 25% commission, who's going to say no to that? Of Howard Turping $1 million painting. Boy, I'm only going to get 250,000 instead of 400,000 because I had to stick to the 60-40 commission or 50-50 or whatever it is. Everything's negotiable.
I like that. That's a great insider secret, that those rates can be negotiable. Because I think especially the younger artists aren't aware of that, especially now that the gallery model has become, I guess, less known about since it's not as common these days, because of the internet. So it's good to know that it's still worth, negotiating even that point, because I have heard a lot of people who are like, oh, I refuse to work with galleries ever because of their commission fee. But knowing now, hey, this is actually negotiable and we can work around something so that it works for both of us. Maybe those artists who poo-pooed those galleries because, oh, why would I do that? Maybe they would change their minds knowing that they could negotiate it. So that's an excellent, excellent point to make.
Just keep in mind that you have to have negotiating power. If you're a brand new artist coming out, why would they take the risk? If you're a Skip Whitcomb or a Clyde Aspavig or somebody, you have some strength behind you, some weight behind you. You're going to bring in good clients. You're going to bring in clients who can afford to spend 6 figures on a painting if they want, certainly 5 figures. So there's something there. So you have to be reasonable about it, and just stick to your guns.
Yeah, and from what it sounds like as well, it sounds like it's also a bit of a long game, where obviously at the beginning of your career, like you said, you can't really lay claim to much, so you have to work with what you got, and then over time, as your career develops and grows, you would hope to help yourself a little bit more with your, I guess, your prestige that you start building up, which is really great.
Sure.
Yeah, and then I like that you also mentioned, meeting the collectors in person, especially, the Prix de West and any other of these really awesome, I guess, shows and experiences like that. How have you personally maintained relationships with collectors? Because I find that a lot of galleries are very hush-hush about who their buyers are. Do you find that you're able to maintain some relationships with your collectors?
Yeah, I have collectors that I'm close friends with. It just depends. It's a personality thing. You hit it off with some of them, and some of them maybe not so much. And it's just like fellow artists. I have a core group of friends that I travel and paint with frequently, just because we're like-minded. Same thing with the collectors. So they'll come into town and want to swing by the studio and visit, maybe have a cup of coffee or a glass of wine, and I enjoy that. See where they're coming from, and they get to see my world. People are always kind of curious about how an artist lives and what they do. So, yeah, met some really fascinating people that way.
Definitely. I feel like people who collect art are very fascinating people. They're very particular compared to like the artists.
Yeah,
I
they
don't
are.
know how to describe them. Yeah, they're very fascinating. They usually have very interesting lives.
Yeah.
Which is really cool. That's really great.
Yeah, and you never know who you're going to meet. I sat and talked with several artists at a show just not long ago at Maxwell Alexander opening at the hotel we were staying at, and a couple of the collectors were talking about AI, and that turned into a fascinating conversation about that, where that was going, and how we could protect ourselves. And you never know really who you're talking to or sitting next to, and they can be quite modest sometimes, and they're very obviously, if they're at a show and dropping money on a $20,000 painting, they're probably very successful people.
Yeah.
And but at the same time, you might meet, I don't know, a school teacher, just somebody you would think is an average Joe that loves art and will drop $2,000 on a painting and absolutely love it.
Yeah. Oh, that's so sweet. I love that. Yeah. It's very true. You never really know a person's hobby, I guess, because I find that, art collectors usually do it as a hobby, and it's a very
That's true.
it's an endearing hobby. Especially, coming from the side of artists. It's like, please continue that hobby, you guys. That's great. Yeah. Which I actually want to ask you as well. What advice would you give to someone who wants to become a full-time artist?
Start early at a young age. Don't decide you want to do that at 55 years of age. Well, if you're approaching retirement, that's better. But if you're 40 years old and you have 3 kids and a wife and a mortgage, be very careful about that. It's a tough way to make a living. Generally, when I teach workshops, I avoid getting into the real nitty gritty of the business of art and just how difficult it is, because I don't want to discourage people. If you really love painting and you want to do it, then do it as early as you can. It certainly helps if you have a spouse who works. Many of the artists that I could mention names out here, including me early on, I had a spouse who was very supportive, working and bringing money into the family. And so it helped kind of stabilize things. That certainly helps. But if you really want to do it, nothing's going to stop you. So get in and get focused. Treat your time like you're at the office. Get a set time. You walk into the studio every day and you paint until this time. Don't bring a TV into your studio or anything like that. Just take it seriously and treat it like a job. Think of it. Every time I got a job, like when I was in college, a cook or something, I'd start at the ground level and knowing that I was going to climb the ladder up as I gained understanding and experience. Do the same thing with art. Take your time and climb the ladder. Start with whatever gallery you can get in. Have an eye on the gallery you want up here 10 years out or whatever, and slowly start to plan and move for that. And by all means, don't spend yourself into debt. That will destroy you. Live within your means. And you'd be surprised how little money you can actually make and have a good life, because I've had workshops where I've had lawyers and doctors in my class who are there because they took time off work to pursue their hobby. Think of an artist. You're pursuing your hobby 24/7. You just don't have a bunch of extra money to play with, but you're living the life, and you can really live on very little and still pursue an enjoyable life just through pursuing your hobby or your interest.
With great freedom comes great responsibility.
Really does. And
Yes.
one of the things that kept me focused is seeing my father and my other family members who were businessmen and who were very structured. And so I felt I needed to create an atmosphere where I was thinking the same way, and that's what I did.
Yeah, and that's an excellent point, because I feel like adding that structure gives it that weight of the seriousness of it, because it's one thing to just like to be an artist or have this fantastic sort of dreamy idea of what being an artist is, but when it comes down to it, you can't be an artist without the art to keep you going. So I agree that having that discipline, that structure, that seriousness to approaching the canvas, approaching your work, can really make a shift in your mindset with, your relationship to your career as an artist. So that's an excellent point to make.
It's also important to create an atmosphere where as soon as you walk through the doors, you want to rise to the level.
Mm-hmm.
And so think about that, however that may be. One person, it might be industrial. Somebody else might have fine furniture in their studio and they want to create work that would go with furniture. I don't know, whatever it is, but walk through those doors and walk into a zone where you want to create and rise to the occasion.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of these young artists might want to also do a little teaching, maybe some beginning painting classes or workshop, that kind of thing. And one of the things that does is it kind of focuses your thinking. When we paint, we tend to paint intuitively. Things are coming out that we're not analyzing. We've already analyzed them, so we know. So we're just pulling from our memory bank. But when you're forced to verbalize those ideas, it makes you think on a deeper level so that you can more clearly express it to your students. So that helps as well. If you only do it for a few years, it'll just kind of get you on track and thinking that way. And if it's something you love, maybe it's something you do, a workshop once a year for the rest of your life. Who knows? But again, individual preference.
Yeah. Yeah. And then that's another income stream that can benefit the artists as well.
It sure is.
Yeah. Yeah. I know a lot of artists who teach workshops precisely because it gives them time to make some money, meet new people, maybe even sell some paintings to their students because that usually happens. And then, thanks to that, they can continue painting for X amount of time without having to worry too much about, oh, I need to sell painting this month, or oh, I need to send this to my gallery like right now. Yeah, it's a bit of that time management side.
It's also a great way to maintain your sanity, because when you paint out in the desert alone, surrounded by lizards and snakes and javelina, or in your studio alone, it's nice to get out into an atmosphere of like-minded people and just kind of share what you know. I've always enjoyed that, especially when you see their aha moments. That's always exciting.
Yeah, it's very sweet to see that. And then you make such a great point. It is, I always forget that being an artist is such an isolating career. Because me being an introvert, I love being alone, but then it does feel nice when you go out, teach a workshop, and you see your students and connect with them and remember, oh yeah, there are people out there who are really great people and they love this too, and you don't have to be alone. Yeah. And speaking of workshops, actually, do you have any workshops that are coming up?
I've kind of cut back on in-person workshops. I do one a year at the Scottsdale Artist School because that's where I taught my first workshop, and they've been so supportive. As a matter of fact, when I got out of college, I took several workshops at Scottsdale Artist School with artists I admire, and they kind of set me on the right track. That was very important to me. So I understand the importance of schools like that. But I teach an online class through the Tucson Art Academy online. And they're open for enrollment 3 times a year. It's like March, July, and November. But that's been kind of fun because I can work it into my schedule in and around my painting time. And at first they asked me to do that for several years, and I said no, because I'm just not a tech person and I didn't want to figure it out. And I just couldn't visualize how that would work. But once I got into it, it's really great, and the students really love it, and they can jump in when they want, or jump in and out, and it's all through a private Facebook community. So it's been kind of interesting. Yeah.
Great. Nice. Oh, that is so cool. That's another aspect of technology that I think has really broadened the horizons for a lot of artists. With especially post-pandemic has been, online workshops and teaching online,
Yeah.
which is definitely much nicer on the wallet. You don't have to fly out, pay for a hotel, which oftentimes can be very expensive, unless the venue where they're having your workshop can cover those expenses, which doesn't always happen. So it's really great.
Yeah, no, it's just think of travel time to and from a workshop. If I'm flying over to the East Coast, that's at least 2 days of my time in travel there and back that I can't get back. And so it can be a problem. And there are drawbacks to both. I mean, we're talking about the drawbacks to in-person. Drawback to online is you don't have that one-on-one in-hand communication when they're standing right next to you.
Yeah.
But the only limitation in the online thing really is there is no limit. How creative are you as far as expressing an idea through video or however it may be? It can really be a powerful medium. So that's another thing to consider.
Definitely.
Or videos, if you want to do an educational video. Yeah.
Yeah. Like you said, there's room for everyone and every kind of lifestyle, taste, etc. So yeah, that's great. And then do you have any upcoming shows actually?
Oh gosh, I need to update my website. Yep. So the next one coming up is the Coors Show in Denver.
Mhm.
That's in January, and then I have it's a show that they upstarted at the Legacy Gallery last year that was quite successful. A Western show that's going to be in early March. But it's with if you go to the Legacy Gallery website, you'll see an advertisement for the show. It's in very early March. Then the Briscoe at the Briscoe Museum and Night of Artists, it's called in San Antonio, and then the Prix de West in June. So that I'm not doing any one person shows. I don't want to set work aside that long. I'd rather do these shows where it's 3 or 4 paintings spread out over time, and then I can get those taken care of, and then just the gallery inventory.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll update my website soon and put it all, which is mattsmithstudio.com. Yeah.
Perfect. Perfect. And actually, now that you mentioned the social show aspect, I was gonna ask because that's a lot of shows coming up. How do you time manage for all of those paintings that you would have to ship out?
Um, from a shipping standpoint, or just creating the work?
Just every step, like from the beginning to the end. Because if you
Oh,
know you have a show that you're being invited to, oftentimes it'll be like, well, I don't have any paintings on me, so I got to make some. How do you manage that time?
okay, so you're probably going to laugh, but this is how I work. I
Mhm.
paint whatever I want to paint whenever I want to paint it. That's my deal. And when the show deadline comes, I pick the 4 best ones to send in for that show. Or I start saving them once I commit to the show. I do better work if I enjoy the process and I'm painting something that really interests me. I can't say, okay, I'm going to paint a this, a that, and a that, because I don't know if they'll turn out. So I paint what interests me, and then I pull out the 4 best versions, or 3, or however many are needed for a particular show, and that's when I send. If during the year, I might pick out, if I have a particularly good painting, I might say, okay, I'm going to hang on to this for this show that's 8 months out. They usually need the images in advance, as you know, for catalogs, that kind of thing, anyway. But yeah, that's how I manage myself. And then as far as the shipping and all that, that's just I take care of that business in the morning and get everything off my mind so that I can focus on painting late morning or into the afternoons.
Mm. Yes, you
And
get to see.
I generally paint, up until about 5 or 6 in the evening. I don't like to get burned out because that will influence the next day. Um, so I'm not one of these artists who works till 2 in the morning on a painting to get a deadline done. My brain doesn't work that way. I have friends who do, and they pull it off very well. I have friends who will say, okay, this week I have to paint a show for this very, or a painting for this very important show. And they're so good they can do it. They know that painting is going to turn out and it'll work. I don't. A painting might go downhill just as quickly as it succeeds for me. So, yeah, I just paint and then save the better ones for the shows, whether it's a gallery show or a museum show.
That's really excellent too because it goes to show that, in working you also get to know yourself and how you work and how you function. Because like you mentioned, your friends might have a different process for themselves and it works for them, but knowing and having those boundaries of this is what works for me and I'm not going to change that just because so and so is doing it, that is such a key point to make.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and you'll figure it out.
Mhm.
No matter what you do in life, you'll figure out what those boundaries are, and how you can expand them or limit them, and just sort of control your environment so you can do what you do best, because that's what it's all about.
Yes, absolutely. Wow, a bunch of great points. A bunch of great points. Well, thank you so much, Matt, for all of your awesome, really important advice and key points because they're going to be bouncing around in my head a lot, and I hope also our listeners' heads.
Well, thank you, and I appreciate you interviewing me. And yeah,
Yeah, of course.
go
And
FASO.
I go also, yeah. And I'll be including all of your links in the show notes in case anyone wants to go check out your beautiful work on your website and maybe sign up for your newsletter to stay up to date.
Yeah, I appreciate that.
Of course. Thanks again.
You bet.